the heart of an accountant. Don't forget to subscribe.
Principles of Taxation. I am your coach, Rebecca M. First, let us discuss the inherent powers of the states. We have the police power, eminent domain, and the taxation power. Police power is the power to enact laws to promote the general welfare of the people. Eminent domain is the power to take private property for public use upon payment of just compensation. While taxation power is the power to take property for the support of the government and for public purpose. So there are similarities among taxation, eminent domain, and police power. First, they are all necessary attributes of sovereignty. They are all inherent to the state, legislative in nature, and there are ways in which the state interferes with private rights and properties. They all exist independently of the Constitution and are exercisable by the government even without a constitutional grant. However, the Constitution may impose conditions or limits to their exercise. They all presuppose an equivalent form of compensation received by the person affected by the exercise of the power, which is just compensation. The exercise of these powers by the local government units may be limited by the national legislature. However, there are distinctions among police power, eminent domain, and taxation. So there are 7 points of difference as to the exercising authority, the purpose, the person affected, the amount of imposition, the importance, relationship to constitution, and limitation. For taxation, government exercise authority for the support of the government, and the community of class of individuals are affected. The tax is unlimited, and it is most important, inferior to the non-impairment clause of the Constitution and constitutional and have inherent limitations. For the police power, the exercising authority is the government to protect the general welfare of the people. The community of class of individuals are affected and there are limited imposition and it is most superior and then superior to the non-impairment clause of the Constitution and for public interest and due process. In the eminent domain, the government and the private utilities have the exercising authority. The purpose is for public use, and the person affected is the owner of the property. No amount imposed because the government pays just compensation. And of course, it is also important, superior to the non-impairment clause of the Constitution and the limitation it is for public purpose and of course, just compensation. Now let's go to the limitations. We have inherent limitations and constitutional limitation. Inherent limitation is divided for public purpose. There is non-delegation of power to tax, meaning the Congress cannot delegate the power to tax to others. There is exemption of government entities from taxation because it's ironic for the state to tax itself. Taxation laws are subject to international committee, meaning the property of a foreign state or government may not be taxed by another. It's friendly relations, interactions, and there is respect between them. Next, the situs or territoriality. As a rule, the taxing power cannot go beyond the territorial limit of the taxing authority, meaning situs of taxation is the state or country which has jurisdiction to tax a person, property, or interest. Now let's go to the constitutional limitations. We have due process of law, meaning Constitution states that life, liberty, or property cannot be taken unless the established procedure prescribed by law have been followed. There is also equal protection of the law, meaning all persons are treated alike under the same circumstances, and there shall be no discrimination in the implementation of tax laws. Third limitation, freedom of religious profession and worship. The Philippine government adopts free exercise of religion and do not subject its exercise to taxation. There is also non-impairment of contracts. Tax exemptions granted under the contract should be honored and should not be cancelled by unilateral government actions. Another constitutional limitation, is no imprisonment for non-payment of tax, meaning no one shall be imprisoned by virtue of his poverty, and no one shall be imprisoned for mere inability to pay debt except if debt acquired in bad faith, which is estafa, a criminal offense punishable by law. Another is revenue, appropriation, tariff bills must be originate from the House of Representatives. The origination of a bill by Congress does not necessarily mean that the House bill must become the final law. It was held constitutional by the Supreme Court when Senate agreed with amendments and changed the entire House version of a tax bill. 7. There is uniformity and equality. All subjects of taxation under the same class shall be treated alike. Thus, the same rate shall apply and shall be based on the ability of the individual to pay. There is also exemption of property actually, directly, and exclusively used for religious, charitable, and educational purposes. Only properties devoted for religious, charitable, and educational activities are exempt from real property tax. Number 9. Majority of all members of the Congress shall pass laws granting tax exemption, meaning only the Congress can grant or provide exemption from taxation to individuals, properties, or transactions, provided there is a concurrence or approval of the majority of its members. Number 10. Non-impairment of the Supreme Court jurisdiction of tax case. The Supreme Court has the final judgment on the legality of any tax law and the penalty imposed thereon. Another important limitation is the Philippine President can veto any item in the tax bill approved by the Congress, meaning the President has veto powers to refuse in signing a bill enacted by legislative body. We have two veto power, item veto and the packet veto. Item veto happens when the President objects to certain items in the proposed bill without affecting the other provisions, while packet veto occurs when he disapproves in totality the bill enacted by Congress. The last limitation is tax collection is a general fund of the government. So meaning all money collected in most cases are for public purpose, put it in the general fund. But for special funds, which is collection for specific purpose, put it in the special fund. Next, we have the scope of taxation. The levy of tax is essentially for public purpose. The subject or objects to be taxed may be person, natural, juridical, or property, real, personal, tangible, or intangible, and also object, different object or subject, business, transactions, rights, or privileges. The government can tax the one. The third is the amount and rate of tax, which shall be uniform and equitable, must be uniform, equitable, and the manner and mode of enforcement and collection must be properly organized. The situs of taxation, it may be exercised only within the territorial jurisdiction of the taxing authority. Now let's go to the characteristics of taxation. First, it is an enforced contribution. Tax is not voluntary and its imposition is in no way dependent upon the will or consent of the person being taxed. Enforced, meaning enforced contribution. It is proportionate in character. The share of the taxpayer on the public burden is essentially based on one's ability to pay. Next, it is levied by the lawmaking body of the state. The power to tax is vested unto the Congress, the House of Representatives from which the tax bill is introduced, and the Senate. The Congress determines who to tax, what to tax, and how the tax shall be collected. Take note, they are not involved in the collection thereof. Number 4. It is levied for public purpose or purposes. Taxes are spent to support government. They are not supposed to be used for private purpose. It's for public purpose. It's for public purpose, not for private purpose. Next, it is generally payable in money. The government and the exercise of its civil remedy in collecting the tax due may be restraint of personal property or by levy of real property. Take the same to satisfy the tax liability if the taxpayer has no money. It is also levied on person and property by the state which has jurisdiction. So that's the characteristic of taxation. Thank you. And now let's go to part 2.